let's get started. Um, Really excited to have this panel together today. I think we've been able to bring together a really amazing group of scientists and product people to talk about how biodesign is interacting with the beauty industry. So why don't we get started by going around the horn here and introducing everyone to who we are. Christina, you're next to me over here.
Okay.
Do you wanna get going? Thank you.
Yeah, sure. So my name is Christina Okubo. I have, I've basically worked primarily in brand communications throughout my entire career, both on the agency side, working in advertising with work for big brands like Target and Nike and Levi's, and have most recently over the last 5+ years worked primarily with beauty and wellness brands. And I currently work as a consultant advisor, as well as I actually have an agency, a creative agency that services beauty and wellness brands. So I don't know if that's
perfect.
keeping
That's
it short.
perfect. Yeah, that's great. Micah, do you want to go next?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Micah Coffendaffer, and I have a background in molecular biology, but now I launch startups that are funded by Procter & Gamble Beauty. So it's been really cool change, and I do a lot of consumer research in different scientific spaces. So excited to be here.
Awesome. Damien, you're next.
All right. G'day, everyone. My name is Damien Perryman, Senior Vice President, Specialty Products at Genomatica. I've been with the company almost 10 years now, which is great for a startup, that we've had such a long tenure. Really, my role is to kind of help plug out pieces of innovation from our technology platform and look for a way of bringing it home, making science matter, giving it a purpose, finding markets, commercialization partners for the ideas that kind of come down our innovation pipeline.
Great. Thanks, Damien. And Bob.
Hey, everybody. I'm Bob Bianchini. I'm a formulator and business leader from the beauty care, personal care, and over-the-counter industry. 30 years experience with several large multinational companies working with brands like Neutrogena, Aveeno, Rodan, and Fields. And I've got 40 publications and patents on chemistry, pharmacology, delivering drugs transdermally. And now I'm a consultant to the industry. So I work with brands, I work with ingredient suppliers and private equity companies looking at our space, the beauty care space, personal care space, and how we can bring new technology forth, and more importantly, new benefits to our wonderful consumers.
Great. Well, thank you so much to all these panelists. And I'll be moderating today. My name is Alex Lorestani. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Geltor. We focus on partnering with big consumer product companies to create hero ingredients using fermentation. Products like animal-free collagen and more recently animal-free elastin. So let's just dive right into it. I think the first place where we wanted to share some perspectives with the audience was just what is it about the beauty industry that makes it such an incredible partner for advanced science and technology? Micah, maybe we can start with you to get a perspective from the kind of brand side, and then excited to see this kind of percolate.
Yeah, sure thing. I think synthetic biology is going to be a huge enabling technology for consumer product goods, specifically beauty, because we're seeing this shift in movement of everybody wants natural products because they're safer. But at the same time, there's just a growing concern for climate change. Like if natural becomes like point of entry, like for people to deliver, there's not going to be enough like essential oils, like flowers, to even be harvested. So as we get into like bioidentical molecules that are natural and that are sustainable, I'm just seeing more and more of a consumer demand for that. And then not to mention, they can be safer and even more efficacious.
That's super helpful. Thanks. And Damien, I know we talked a little bit yesterday as well. Were there any other thoughts that you had on this topic?
Yeah, I mean, we see the beauty industry as an inherently innovative industry. It's always been one of those sectors that have sort of plowed R&D back into studying new things. I mean, Estee Lauder was one of the first companies to really invest in, understanding skin cells, circadian rhythm, and the role of clock genes in cellular repair. So, I mean, when we think beauty, we do see a real font of innovation there. But we were chatting yesterday about, why do we think these type of companies really drive innovation? And I think it's because the products they make touch consumers in a very intimate and very direct and personal way. And so they're held accountable, they're held responsible by their customers for keeping up with the times, adjusting to change and bringing new innovative products to market. And, as technologists, biotechnologists, we see that as a wonderful industry to partner with, because we've got this great scientific platform of really making disruptive change, and the two pieces seem to really fit very well together.
Those are great points too. Anyone want to add anything else to that?
I think from a,
Yeah, I think this whole area is, I'm sorry,
no,
go ahead,
go ahead.
Christina, please. I just wanted to comment is that not only has this been an area that we've been investigating for a number of years, but it's proven out in our products. In that, as Micah said, we are formulating more effective beauty care products and safer products, because what's coming from biology, I like to call it a tighter cut of the chemistry. So instead of getting this mixture of different chemistries, and the best example I cite is the 1,3-propanediol, we get a pure molecule that's safer, that performs better, and it's easier to formulate and has a better stability profile. So there's like all these check boxes for systems biology versus a petroleum-based material that really beauty care is perfect for.
I think touching on what Micah mentioned is that, today's consumer is so much more educated than, we were 10 years ago. And so as a result, our consumers really do have so much more information to go off of, and understanding the fact that they can actually be on the receiving end of a more consistent kind of experience when it comes to clean products, I think is a huge customer benefit. And as Bob mentioned, just the efficacious aspect, I think, is just a huge driver from a consumer standpoint, particularly in the beauty industry. I think that the sustainability aspect is also obviously a huge plus. But at least from a consumer standpoint, I think some of the challenges that a lot of companies face is the communication around it, and finding the best ways to articulate the balance between all of the different kind of benefits that biotech really does have to offer. So it requires a lot of education, I think.
Bob, I got to weigh in on this idea of tighter cut, if I can, Alex. I mean, I love the concept of, I've spent years talking to the chemical industry about the fundamental difference of using biology for processes versus using chemistry for processes. And we often tie into this idea that when we use chemistry, the whole goal of the chemical industry was to take a really, really cheap feedstock like oil that makes a lot of different things. It's a really mess of compounds in there. It's very heterogeneous. It's a mess. And you try and pluck out little bits and pieces and turn it into something. So you're going from this large mess of something and trying to turn it into useful stuff. But with biology, I mean, for biology to have survived for as long as it has, it had to be enormously selective with the energy it had available to it, right? Because if it was wasteful, it died, and we didn't see it anymore. So when we explain the difference between biology and chemistry, we kind of focus on the selectivity. You take a substrate, you turn into something with a very, very specific purpose, and everything's geared towards that purpose. And I think that's one of the fundamental differences between chemistry and biology. And it's that idea of that tighter cut, as you say, Bob. We don't waste, right? We don't make stuff just because it can. We tailor out those side reactions. We tailor out those impurities. We design with a very specific endpoint and purpose.
I think I love the concept too, just to reflect what our experience has been like in the world of collagen. Traditionally for like thousands of years, folks have been getting collagen by basically boiling or, acid treating skin and bones. And you can imagine you get a pretty big mix. It's kind of a soup that literally, in some cases, that comes out of that process. And it's been exciting to ask questions like, what is the functional part of that soup? If you could make something that wasn't reliant on, having, hundreds of millions or billions of animals as the source for that soup, what could you do? And begin to explore things like really specific parts of human collagens, for example, that you can just make through fermentation with a lot of precision. So I think that this is, a really exciting area for for the industry to partner with Biodesign around. And something I wanted to circle back to was a comment that Christina made around sort of how consumers are interacting with these products. And we see some kind of comments in the side here. I think one of the most interesting dynamics that we've been observing as a community is the amount of visibility that consumers are having into what's inside of the bottle. It's nothing like what we have really seen before. You know, in the US, it's, I don't know, a quarter or a third of consumers when they're either shopping online or walking into Ulta, Sephora, et cetera, you know, they're using some app to understand, like, literally what is inside of that ingredient deck. And that's, I think, a great thing for consumers. And I think it's a great opportunity for biology companies too, because to the point you've all been making, that view into the safety, the sustainability, and the performance of the product is something that, like, you can now have a direct connection with the consumer around. So that's really exciting to see. And that's here in the US. I think in other parts of the world, like Asia, it is even more advanced. It's that level of visibility is even more intense and good.
Even to build off of that, Alex,
Yeah,
like
please.
it's not only like what's in the bottle, but how it got there. So like the ability to be able to trace, like I'm seeing like blockchain even start to explode as an area. Consumers want to know exactly where the product came from. So materials produced through Synbio give us a huge opportunity to really give the consumer full traceability to when an ingredient was added, how it was added, where it's from. So it's really exciting.
Yeah.
I think this is a perfect kind of area for us to explore now, which is like, what is it that consumers are looking for that Biodesign can actually deliver on? And maybe how do companies that are how do consumers interact with the brands, you know, to sort of make that happen?
I mean, you know, the way that I generally work with those types of kind of processes is just, if you can try to find a way to work backwards from a consumer need, that definitely helps drive the communication or the language that you develop around your products, or the potential of, you know, how do you bridge that gap? Because I think one of the observations that I've had is that I think while biotech and biodesign in general has so much to offer, and it represents such a large opportunity for the beauty industry, is that so much gets lost in translation a little bit, right? Where it's almost like two different types of people talking to one another. They're not talking the same language. And so you really do have to make a lot of deliberate effort to find, you know, what drives the consumer to you know, what are their needs and what drives them to make a purchase, so that you can kind of maybe help reverse engineer some of the language to go back to, you know, speaking about your products. That's, I mean, yeah, I know that it might be kind of unintuitive for tech companies to think that way sometimes, but at the same time, you know, at the end of the day, if you're not able to resonate with your audience, then it makes it, I think, extremely challenging, even if you have a great product.
I mean, Christina, I think you hit something just absolutely key, right? I mean, the element of design is to do something with purpose. Just doing good science for the sake of it is kind of irrelevant. Design, you've got to have that purpose in mind, which means you've got to be designing your science, your product, at the same time you're getting that feedback from what are consumers, what are customers actually looking for. And, you know, they care about a lot of different things. Safety, they care about supply chains, they care about sustainability, they care about natural, they care about clean, they care about efficacy. And it's a conversation with them that helps you to kind of connect to exactly what their priorities are. And it's so micro-segmented these days, right? The consumer pockets are so different from one another, which is why the rise of indie brands has been so dramatic in the last handful of years, because individually they get this opportunity to, you know, connect to the values of their specific customers. I mean, Lady of Beast launched some products a couple of weeks ago, and, you know, we're honored enough to be an ingredient that's featured in there. But now we start to see labels putting sourcing references, not directly in the INCI list, but kind of annotated down below. This is where our hero ingredients are coming from. And when you see it on the labels, now you really start to realize that, hey, this is a part of the communication with the customers. Because absent that, you know, what are you working on? Why is it important? That communication is really key to building that engagement.
Yeah, that's important for us as formulators as well, is that what's the source of the material? What's the traceability, the supply chain? is, of course, now in the COVID world, the traceability is going to be security even more important. So I think what systems biology or biodesign allows is a much more controlled supply chain where you can actually go back and figure out where this is coming from. So I love that you guys are doing that.
Yeah, and I think our competition, the incumbent petroleum-based industry, is somewhat reluctant to promote supply chain traceability because it kind of it opens up the house, right, to everything that they've been doing that consumers aren't particularly resonating with. As biologists, we love the idea. Like, let's be absolutely transparent about our supply chain. Let's take you out into the field where the sugar was grown, or let's take you to the plantation where we've been harvesting this renewable biomass. We'll show you exactly where it comes from. We want to, it's a part of our differentiation, and we think it's a wonderful part of the story.
Have there been any experiences, I'm looking at one of the questions in the chat here, any experiences around, navigating consumer perceptions when they're looking at, quote unquote, natural products versus synthetic products? And how do you think about the way bio-based products fits into that spectrum?
I think that's going to be huge, like just meeting with consumers and working on some natural brands, doing some startups on natural brands. I think it's like an evolution. Like when we see people enter naturals, they start with diet and they have some health event where they have to then like change their diet. They start to feel better. So now that they worried what they put in their body, they start worrying what they put on their body. And it's all about this safety, longevity thing. As we've seen that consumer group develop, and I mean, we've seen it grow from like 15% when I started in this area a couple of years ago to now it's almost like half the people are kind of like in this more devoted space. They are now shifting to really wanting to be more sustainable, and then really, really understanding like, hey, you told me this is sugarcane bio-based plastic, but who harvested it? Was it like fair labor trades? Like what is that backstory to this? So I see it as more of an evolution on this. It could be the same consumer's journey or even like a more leading edge, higher educated consumer, but it's definitely a journey and a transition that I'm starting to see people enter into.
That's great. Any other comments?
I was looking at that. Yeah, I was looking at that question as well, Alex, about is there a negative perception around engineered organisms?
Yeah.
And, interestingly, a consumer looks at a product, they read the label on the back. It doesn't tell you if the ingredients were made from an engineered organism or not, right? It just gives you the list of ingredients. So where does the negative perception belong? Perhaps it's in the formulators and the brands who are using ingredients that are made that way. We're working with over 500 customers right now in the beauty industry, and I would say less than 7% have ever cared about this being a genetically modified microorganisms that's making our particular product. And we make 1,3-butylene glycol from sugar via fermentation, right? It's always been made petroleum based, so we have a very different story to tell. And there are certifications that will be against the use of genetically modified organisms. And so they will actually have an impact, but it's not whether our ingredient is made from a genetically modified microorganism or not that reaches the consumer. It's whether or not it can qualify for a certification that is somehow communicating whether the product is good or not. That's where our issue tends to lie. And so we try to tackle at the certification level to educate people responsible for those certifications that, look, innovation is going to change the way you're looking at products. The way you were thinking about it 5 years ago shouldn't be the way you're thinking about it today. And if you're not updating your perception on what technology is allowing for, then eventually you're going to become somewhat redundant to where the space is moving. And we're seeing that there's a Cosmos label over in Europe, favored heavily by sort of some of the smaller brands, but some of the larger brands have been just leaving it behind because it's not giving them the flexibility in formulation to use the breadth of ingredients that they want to use.
That's great.
I've really seen that come on.
Please,
yeah, it's crazy. In Europe, I just did some research over there right before the shutdown, and many more consumers are using the Yuka app, which is much more similar to our EWG app. And so like by looking ingredient by ingredient, they're looking more of like the safety, toxicity, like reproductive type things, getting ratings on those versus Cosmos wasn't really mentioned much at all in France or London.
And I think the next level for those apps, Maker, I'm so glad you brought it up, is they look to safety, which is absolutely where they should look to first, right?
Yeah.
But then let's talk about sourcing. Can we start getting annotations into the way that they report on ingredients or products with their ingredients list to start to bring the sourcing conversation into it? Because sustainability is still a really, really important consumer subject.
That's great. I'm curious, Bob, from a formulator's perspective, how have you seen this sort of evolve over the past, 5, 10 years, if at all? Just curious to see if the way you're thinking about building products is reflecting how the technology is changing.
It is. It is. We are formulating around the biology in some cases to make the products more compatible with what's being delivered and to maximize the benefit, as well as to take advantage of some of the consumer trends such as sustainability. We're also excited that there's the potential, I think, for even better performing ingredients for what we call over-the-counter medications or OTC pharmaceuticals for those who are not in the States. And what I mean by that is if you take, for example, the skin disease called acne, which is actually bacterial infections of the skin by C. acnes, which has over 200 species around the world. The opportunity for synthetic biology is to change the paradigm from basically we hit the skin with a really hard, almost like a nuclear reactor. We put benzoyl peroxide, salicylic acid, harsh ingredients to kill that bacteria. Now, what Damien, his team, and others like Zymergen are able to do is they're going in and biodesigning something that could actually control the proliferation of the bacteria, eventually resolve the issue of a lesion or an eczematic skin condition in a much more elegant and like almost a systematic way of locking in to what's going on rather than just blowing up the cells. So I think the formulations are going to become even more esoteric, more elegant, more performing, and more consumer and skin compatible.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks. That's really cool. I'm curious, like kind of bouncing off of that, if anyone can point to examples of products that, folks that are tuning in are interested in understanding, what does this look like on the shelf? Like, what does this look like when it's actually being expressed in a brand? Are there kind of case studies that you'd like to highlight that might be a good way of showing folks how biodesign can work with some of these new beauty products?
I mentioned Lady of Beast just a moment ago. They just launched a new product. Kinfield launched a product earlier this year. They actually launched this really cool water balm hydrating stick for people going out hiking. And they had about 4 different ingredients in there. They called them their hero ingredients, and they called out the source, right? And they called out the story of how the ingredient got from the source into their product. And you read it and you actually see, okay, there's this really emotional quotient to it where the sourcing is a part of why they make products. Why they make products is to connect to their consumers and why their consumers want to be out in nature and want to be using products that they see to be as not harmful or not, somewhat helpful to the preservation of that environment around them. So, the more and more we see stories like that, I think the more we're going to connect to consumers.
I think another maybe more obvious but great example is Biossance. I mean, Biossance really has spearheaded that, I think, within the beauty space, at least within skincare. And, they have a very 360 approach. They may not be nearly as diligent as, the examples that Damien shared as far as kind of sourcing, but I think that they've done a really good job of crafting, the messaging around their technology and the innovation that is very consumer friendly. And, I think, yeah, they've done a really great job because they have, again, they're, whether it be packaging materials, completing the sustainability kind of story. They also don't, to be fair, they also don't go into a lot of detail around the technology. They kind of keep it at the surface level, but I think that that's something that will evolve over time. And as consumers become more educated, they will have the ability to understand and grasp the more complex biological kind of concepts that biotech has to offer. So I think for the time that they have launched, I think that they were extremely relevant in their approach. And I think you know, as we see new product lines or brands launch over the next 5 to 10 years, that will progress in terms of the level of kind of intellectually infused messaging, if you will, or the depth that, you know, brands can go into.
Yeah, it's a great example of an early disruptor, Christina. You know, if you put all of this energy into developing innovation and then you hope that you know, your markets or you hope that your partners will do something with it, sometimes your hopes can fall flat.
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the things that Amyris did with Biosense, which I truly admire, is they said, like, let's just do it ourselves. Right, let's go the next step. Let's go all the way to market, and actually let's demonstrate how you can bring a you know, a sustainable, renewable offering that substitutes squalene from shark oil. It's a wonderful story.
Yeah.
And then they layered on this education school, so now they've got an online education forum. Really, that they're trying to build those strong connections with their marketers. And I love the products. My bathroom's full of Biosense. It's great.
Yeah. It was interesting. I was going to say Biosense as well. And I did a social audit looking at all their Instagram posts and which ones were the most like interacted with and everything, and like how they would talk about those. And that clear enemy that you're talking about of the sharks, like was their most interacted with, most positive feedback on the social post when they talked about it that way. They just had this little graph of like all, and you know, that they weren't using any sharks at all. And I think when you have that clear enemy that you can talk about too, and that's really important to their consumer, that's really important.
Yeah, it creates for a very compelling way to connect with the consumer. I mean, I think that the shark piece, yeah, it was, I think when squalene first started trending, you know, there was a lot of excitement around the benefits of it, but it was highly controversial, you know, from an environmental and ecology standpoint. So it really did, you know, I think tapping into that was really great for them.
Thank
These
you.
are our hero brands, Alex. We should just continue to applaud them. I mean, the more and more they're successful, the
I'm
more
gonna put on a
pull and the
different
more
t-shirt.
momentum they create for all of us.
That's fantastic. You know, maybe we can. There's a great question on the side. There's actually a bunch of great questions. I wish we could get to all of them, but maybe we can wrap up with perspective for some of the entrepreneurs in the audience. We're all building companies, investing in companies, building technologies. And Kyle asked, you know, what do you think the industry, the synthetic biology industry, needs to do to accelerate adoption of these products into the beauty industry? Just would love to know if you all had any closing thoughts on that point.
I think we need to
I think it's that.
Sorry, go ahead. I'll come back to the goal comment.
I was just going to say, I think it's what Christina said is like figuring out how to talk to consumers about this. Like, I honestly think that's the biggest nut we have to crack, because the technology is there. It's getting like developed more and more, but how like even leading edge consumers are still a little bit confused about how it actually works.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think we all need to set goals. Everyone in the supply chain. And from that perspective, what I mean is like when we talk to customers, brands, we want them to use our bio-based ingredients where it actually connects to a goal that they have, some mission that they've stated. We want to reduce our environmental footprint by this. We want to launch X number of new natural brands. We want to connect to our consumers in this way. Our traction and the rate of adoption we have is so much more dramatic. Right, we're not just trying to play the purchasing game of we've got a supply, it's in this part of the world, it's at this price and this quality. If we're connecting to a goal of a customer, then it's electric. We move so much more quickly. And so I encourage everyone we talk to throughout the supply chain, the more we're setting in goals around change and we're living those goals and we're living those goals outwardly, the faster change can happen.
I have just a couple of comments. One, just going off of what
certainly
Sorry. The delay.
Please.
Just to touch off of what Damien just shared, you know, in terms of having goals. One of the things that I work with a lot of business owners around is the idea of kind of positioning, right? Positioning your brand and your company within your industry. And a big part of that is having a point of view. you have to really have a distinct point of view, and that ties back to your values and what your commitments are as a company. So I definitely encourage companies to really think about that in terms of where you sit within, your space. And then the other comment that I was just going to make is going off of what Micah shared about understanding your consumer, is that I do think that for biotech companies, depending on your business model or the type of business you're in, is that it might be two layered, meaning that you have your beauty brands that you're supplying, right? And understanding their needs as a manufacturer, as a company that is offering finished products, but then also understanding the end user, and ultimately their needs are slightly different, right? So yes, you do have to work backwards from an end user perspective of understanding what the consumers are looking for and what they need right now. But then you also have to understand where your brands and your customers are coming, the perspective that they're coming from, so that you can help them and facilitate their success as well, I think.
Thanks. And Bob, you get the last word.
I just think in this whole area of education and awareness is going to be something the industry will have to step up to the plate, right? Alex, you've talked at the Society of Cosmetic Chemists, the Personal Care Products Council, which lobbies in DC. There's all these outlets out there, and the industry will just have to do a better job. And that's happened in the past. It's not anything that can't be done. I think maybe on the branding side, you'll start seeing an Intel inside, maybe on the packages, where we start actually promoting, these types of new technologies, and the consumer becomes more aware and has websites they can go to. So I think it'll come pretty soon.
Education is definitely key. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, thank you all so much. I know I've enjoyed this conversation a lot. It's been really energizing, and I sounds like from the questions the audience has really enjoyed it. So appreciate the time. We can wrap up. Hope that everyone who's joined this session will go out and join one of the other really exciting sessions that's going on today. Thank you all so much.